Hello, and thank you so much for joining our special session today on unconscious bias. It's special because this is one of several other interviews in a video series that we decided to do here at Puractio Coaching. For those of you that do not know, Puractio Coaching is a professional coaching practice that focuses on folks, whether they're doing executive preparation or they're refining their leadership skills in the business side, or working on mental and emotional well-being or relationship success on the life side. We're here to help our clients with accountability. It's also unique because I get to interview one of my closest and dearest friends, Marco Rivero. Marco and I have known each other for a long time, having even been business partners in other pursuits as well. Marco is a partner at Tribus Small Business Advisors in Denver, Colorado, where he focuses on mergers and acquisitions as an expert advisor and partner to several small businesses in the area. In the past, Marco has had a very robust 9-year tenure at Ball Corporation, a Fortune 300 company, where he was afforded a very unique opportunity to hone his skills in M&A, mergers and acquisitions, which includes both the buy side and the sell side divestitures of the transactions. While he's always demonstrated and had this passion, and I know firsthand, for small businesses and building ventures, his passion demonstrably grew after having the rare opportunity to work with Hollywood's own Jason Momoa in a venture where they launched and he helped run the startup of a beverage brand. Beyond his professional life, Marco enjoys traveling overseas, foreign languages, indulging in international cuisine, sports, music, and above all, spending time with his family and raising his new young family, which comprises his wife and 2 young boys. Marco, how did I do? Anything to add? You want to say a few words before we jump into it?
No, I think you got it, man. I'm happy to be here. Happy to share any value that I can. But yeah, you hit it right on the spot.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, let's just get into it then. So the topic, like I said before, is unconscious bias, specifically targeting unconscious bias when working with marginalized communities. That can be in the workplace, it can be in your personal life and or both. But I think it'd be interesting to just hear some historical context, if you would. So if you'll entertain, could you tell us a bit more about how has unconscious bias or how does unconscious bias actually emerge for you in your non-work or even work settings?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I think everyone has unconscious bias, whether they're projecting it themselves or receiving it. And there's, different areas where that occurs. In this topic as to marginalized communities, I think it'd be fair to start with my story here in the U.S., which is that of an immigrant boy. My family and I immigrated to the U.S. in the early 90s. And so one of the things that I learned early on was that the United States is a country that loves labels. And so they're very good at, bucketizing groups of people into like 4 or 5 categories, which is shocking. And actually I'll probably come back to this later, but this is, I think, one of the key issues with, one of the key sources of unconscious bias, because we're already being socially programmed to bucketize groups of people into a couple of different groups and then form opinions or assumptions about them. And so I had the privilege of coming from a country, I realized this in hindsight, Venezuela, that doesn't deal with this type of unconscious bias in terms of, at least in the racial sense, right? Because it's a very diverse country and it's just not something that is very labeled or it's not something that I experienced as a kid. It was only after I moved to the U.S. that I realized that, in Venezuela I had kids that looked like many different people. So Asian backgrounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, African background. But here it's really kind of shoved in your face, if you will. And so yeah, I have experienced that throughout my upbringing. I could name countless stories. One of them that sticks out is I got a scholarship at a reputable firm. I won't name the name. The scholarship was for an international assignment, overseas, and it had to do with something with diversity. All I was interested in was being able to travel overseas and do the scholarship, for a portion of the scholarship overseas for the internship. And I didn't get chosen, right? And so I everyone can make their own conclusions. I had this intuition, and I believe that this was right. I wasn't Hispanic enough to to participate in that scholarship, because ultimately the firm was using that as sort of the poster for their diversity efforts, right? And so, my bucket, that I earned here in the U.S. was that of Hispanic. So, because I come from a Spanish-speaking country, I'm a Latin American, and so everyone who meets that criteria, right? There's, dozens and dozens of Spanish-speaking countries will get bucketized into Hispanic in the U.S. Even, meanwhile, there's so many differences between those countries. My wife is Mexican, for example. We have a lot of differences. We share the language, but there's an issue there with labeling a group of people into these, a few categories. Yeah, and so I can go further into that, but basically, yes, I've experienced it throughout my youth, into high school, college. In college, I'll recount another story. I remember being, at a bar out one time in my college town, and talking to someone outside, and we were talking about college and the courses I was enrolled in, and he assumed that, he's like, oh, you got a diversity scholarship, right? Because how else would I have been able to be in the university, be a senior at this university? And little did he know is that I was an international student at the time, and the funny thing is that international students paid like 3 times more tuition on average than American students. And so, these were just lessons and calluses inevitably that I built along the way. And so, yes, I have had my fair share of receiving unconscious bias from a lot of people.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Something that stuck out, a couple things that stuck out to me, this idea of, Hispanicism, someone being Hispanic, like that, it does feel like a very, quote unquote American thing, right? Like a lot of other countries are not dealing in this. I mean, a lot of other countries are more homogenous, I think, but I mean, it's a very, on the verge of a very global world. So I think that's kind of that even that assumption is not even, that assumption is not really true anymore. Like most places are really diverse. So that's interesting. Like even where there are other places that are diverse, folks aren't really categorizing people in the same way. And then, the performative nature of the firm that you were talking about, we need our token. Tokenism is it's not new. And I think it's just in the last couple, 10 years, I'll call it, where folks are, kind of talking about it in work. I mean, DEI's, been around. I think of bell hooks and, intersectionality from the third wave of feminism back in the 80s. And so it's been around. The ideas have been around for a while, but we just, I think, recently started talking about it in business. So that performative thing, that's happening. I mean, that's happening everywhere. I can relate to that. And then, finally, I think it's interesting the college story, because a lot of people do have, that's a bias, right? That was a great example. A lot of people just think that people's situations are the same because they look a certain way, because they sound
right.
a certain way. And so I thought that was tickling. I found that kind of humoring, the person just saying, oh, you must be on a full ride, right? No, actually I'm not. I'm paying 3 times more than you are. It's ironic. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing. I mean, the other thing I think about is the business side. With that, you were talking about your firm, and I know you're, a pretty polished and tenured leader in business, and so, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your experience in, the business space, but specifically coming from, you as, a Latino or Hispanic male in the United States. And having to, maybe code switch or show up a certain way in the business. So that's one aspect of it. But there's probably the other aspect of like who you truly are and how they come together. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about your business experience from the leadership lens.
Yeah, I think that, I was mentioning sort of having the privilege in hindsight to come from a place where we didn't really experience that. And so I think I have that's given me a reference to what does the absence of unconscious bias around race look like. And as I say that, I think that there are a lot of people that are born and raised here into I'll call it the system, even though I don't like that word, but of the social programming, as I've said before, that that is of, you look a certain way, then you must, you belong to this group, quote unquote, and that means you like this type of food, you like this type of music, and we even see it in politics when they talk about, oh, well, the black vote is saying this, and this candidate needs to talk more to the Hispanics. I'm like, I don't remember getting an email about that. Like I don't necessarily agree with all the other Hispanics. Or it's just people, right?
Right.
And it's given me that it's built tough, thick skin, and through that adversity. By the way, I think adversity is good. I think adversity prepares you for real life, and in a way, it kind of gives you an advantage. If you're able to flip the script and use it productively. And so, let me mention another anecdote. I'm full of anecdotes now, but when I was at my previous corporate job, where I had the longest part of my career, I remember early on we had completed a deal, an acquisition of another company, so we had a celebration, and then I ended up kind of hanging out with two of my colleagues who are my friends, and had a great time, had a lot of laughs. They took me home, and then the next morning, they sent me a text through this group text saying, you are the whitest Hispanic I know. Oh. You're the whitest Hispanic I know. But, I realized they meant that as a compliment. And I was just like, what the hell? Like, what is that? What does that mean? Right. And I think they meant something like they had, an easy time or a relaxed time hanging out with me. I understood their jokes. We had a great time. I was kind of like one of them. And I'm like, we're friends, right? So that shined through, and I've had other instances like that. Now, by this point, I had, because of all my upbringing, I didn't really pay much attention to it. It didn't really affect me that much. But I did have a defining moment after that, which is, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I really, really strongly believe in this, is that it really, they meant that as a compliment. They for all I know, like they didn't know that was a bias that they had, that they were projecting. And, I realized that, and this is how I shaped my approach thereafter, is through two words, which are empathy and grace. Navigating this world of, in the U.S., right? We're talking about U.S. and this is now corporate world, and how do you get ahead? How do you live a good life and excel and work with other people? In the face of unconscious bias of what I've experienced, I've learned to, one, lean into my adversity, right? So to flip the script, use that as an asset, and I'm grateful for it. And then two, lead by the work that I perform, by my skills. And that's really the value, right? With a lens now of empathy and grace. So empathy and grace is not that you're rooting for them. It just means that you understand that they may not, frankly, just have been educated on that.
Right.
This is programming that has happened for decades and decades in this country, and there is a reward mechanism, by the government, by corporations. You could slap on a sticker that says you're diverse. Universities are graded based on how many of this kind of people, and it's usually based on superficial qualities like appearance, those universities enroll. And so, growing up in this system, it's like I had empathy for them, and so the way I use that to my advantage, if you want to call it that, is that I wasn't operating from a place of anger or resentment. And I think that that's the case a lot of times when people, when they feel victimized by unconscious bias, is that they're holding that in, and it frustrates them, and rightly so. But it's just been my approach, my strategy to navigate these complexities, and it's proven to be very useful. There's a funny thing that happens when you show up with empathy and grace, but you lead with the work and the skills that you have. It kind of works itself out. You're there showing the value that you're adding, and you let the other stuff slide. Eventually, over time, you seem to be either less affected by it, or the better outcome is that it becomes less apparent or less present, really. And so that's been my approach. That's helped me a lot navigate through corporate world. At the end of the day, I think anyone that wants to excel in life and business and in career, we just want the chance to compete, right? We just want, we want the chance to play the game. right? We don't want handouts. We don't want special treatment. And that's why I've never been a fan of specific groups where they try to put me in high school where it's like, oh, join the Latino network or whatever it was called. Or, I was asked in my previous corporate job, would you want to be the president of the something to the effect of the Latin something diversity, and I knew more about those programs, right? And I just didn't want to no, I want to spend my time excelling my job. Just because I'm Hispanic doesn't mean that I'm going to be participating in those things. And so I think that's kind of it's been kind of my rule book, if you will.
No, that's great. No, thank you. And you actually, it's funny. You answered the question I was going to ask you next, but I have another one for you. But what's interesting about what you just said, because like you said, some things might be provocative. People may or may not agree, but I think the fact of the matter is, we know what we're doing now is not working. So, my next question is going to be around education, right? Maybe you have some pointers on what could we be educating folks on to make it better, because you've already shared to me, in my opinion, some tactics or some ways that people that are on the margin can better work in the space, kind of in the confines, which is a shame, but this is the game we play. So I loved what you said. Before I ask the next question, I just wanted to point out something. And these two things go hand in hand. So the whole you're not like normal or other Hispanics, or something to that effect. That's a microaggression. That is a microaggression. And what's interesting about it is, like you said, I mean, and I tend to agree with you. A lot of people don't know they're doing it. It just comes out. Hence society. There's all these norms and maxims and things we have to live by, and it's not only for race. Which is why I mentioned bell hooks earlier and intersectionality. We just happen to be talking about that through that lens. But sure. Yeah, I mean, these things. I have experience that these things happen all the time, and someone thinks they're complimenting you, and then it feels backhanded. But then at the same time, like you said, if you're having grace and empathy, you can kind of cut through that and see the compliment, but you shouldn't have to do that. And so, right. How do we educate folks and kind of assuage or minimize some of that happening is, I think, the next focus. So any ideas, maybe 2 or 3 things on how we could do that?
This is not going to go away. And so I think that, you have to look at it, you have to look at 2 parts, right? How passionate or how important is this for you as far as society and the impact that you can have on society? I happen to be, you happen to be too, passionate about these topics. It's just something I've, since an early age, found very curious and have wanted to learn more. And I plan on doing, maybe something more of these initiatives. So realizing that that's not going to go away, how can we impact? But then also on the individual side, how do we excel individually in our professions, in our lives, in our relationships, in this environment? I've said the whole thing about, leaning on adversity, having grace and empathy, right, in a way that is productive mainly for you, but then also that could also be an educating moment for the other person or other group. It depends how much effort you want to put into that. Like I've said in the beginning, we all have unconscious bias that we're projecting. I mean, so do I. I'm probably not aware of a lot of them in other areas. And so, but if you think that, hey, I'm a leader, I have a team, I'm leading a team of people, or I'm a head of household, whatever that it may be, and I want to make sure that I'm not. I want to kind of understand myself better. I think that's where it starts. And frankly, in a society where this is programmed and where we have, unfortunately, this reward feedback mechanism through governments and corporations and stuff, I think it'd be wise to work with a professional to help unfold kind of hey, why, if I am kind of projecting these things, where does that come from? Right? And then that way you can get to the root of it. I think that the growth can't happen if you don't understand the root of it. And if you're in a position where you're impacting others, that's paramount. That's super important to do that work. And then once you've made progress there, I think you lead by example. Just using the kind of the racial side of it, right? You're leading a group of people. Understand the truth, right? The truth is in the work that you have to do to kind of understand that. But then lead by example, meaning make sure if you want to bring inclusion and equity into your organization, give people the chance to play the game, give people a chance to compete, and focus on that rather than slapping a Band-Aid on something, right? That may may in your mind fix something short term, but then what is that creating? What is that affecting as far as the other people that are of witness to that? Because that's what happens a lot. People think that through programs that exist, that through this whole reward mechanism, scholarships and placements and affirmative action and diversity hires, which I saw much of in my company, other people witnessing that is like, oh, someone took my job, or someone they got that because they look a certain way, and it's like. You don't want to continue fostering that or cultivating that. Now, there are people that are at disadvantage and could have entered the workplace through one of those means, and they're just as good as you or the next person next to them. But just the optics of it, right? As a leader, focus on what it is you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to give everyone an equal playing field to compete in a world where, unfortunately, we have marginalized communities. That's just a fact. So it's not going to go away in the short term. You can navigate it individually, and then if you're impacting other people, make sure you do that work first for yourself.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, everything from the first thing you mentioned about just finding resources on your own and educating yourself. I loved what you said about kind of working with a professional, someone that knows the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, if you will, DEI and B space. You talked about showing up as a leader. Like you have done this, very, I believe, gracefully in your career, but coming and presenting yourself in a way that kind of aligns with the behaviors that we were just talking about. And then finally, like you said, like level the playing field. As a leader, I can't agree enough. I've said this a lot in my past, just in panels and conversation, anecdotally, whatever. Sponsorship and providing opportunities for people is so important, especially those that come from marginalized communities, because I'm willing to bet. I mean, you can bet your bottom dollar that those folks probably didn't have the same access to resources, upbringing, whatever it is, privilege. And so, some people might just need a little bit of extra support. It's not a handout. It's not something to be, like you're not giving charity. It's actually like it's critical for folks' careers in some cases. And so I love that you mentioned that, because a lot of organizations I've seen, whether consulting them and partnering with them or working for them, the DEI thing is so woke, it's so trendy, it's so like top of mind right now. But a lot of people still don't. I mean, a lot of times we still can't even align on what that means. We still can't align on what we're trying to bring to the company. We still can't align on how it fits into the actual strategy and helps us be better as people and in our organizations together. So those are really good, man. I really appreciate all those points. As we close this out, I want to leave everyone with one last thought, and that's kind of, we talked about these different things that you could probably try to do and go and improve, whether you're on the side of being marginalized or not, or maybe you're both and a leader, and the performative side or the inauthentic side that we kind of alluded to earlier. It's a great time to just go and look within, lean into, like you said earlier, Marco, some of the adversity. Don't be afraid of it, and make the changes that you need to make. Working with a professional is great because if they're helping you with goals, it becomes something very tangible. So it's accountability. So I just wanted to leave people with that. Marco, did you want to say anything about Tribus? Any upcoming events? We'll share your information in the credits, but anything that we should know about Tribus here and now?
We're a newer firm, so we help people buy and sell small businesses. Speaking on this topic too, we have a target audience that is much different from the one I was used to at my previous job. And so, for example, we're seeing a lot of baby boomers, right, that are retiring and that need help selling their business and stuff. And and it's funny how to to encounter that generation, and there's different kinds of biases that come out of that too, mainly age related as well. And so it's there's always something, right? You have to just kind of learn how to work with adversity, how to make it work for you. And so yeah, no, that's all I would say for that. But I wish everyone a lot of luck in this journey.
I thank you so much. Well, Marco, it's been a great pleasure to sit across from the table, doing something a bit more businessy, but also creative. So I just really appreciate you, man, for taking some time, sharing your your wealth of knowledge, your very important thoughts about the topic, and hopefully we'll have you back to talk on another topic later.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me, and yeah, pleasure to be here.